I did a gig last night which had all of the it had all of the initial factors for the worst gig ever. For a start, it was in Portsmouth, and sorry if you're from that side of the country, but Portsmouth comedy is a bit different to Brighton comedy. I think one of the worst times I ever bombed, I went to Gosport, which is near there, a bit further, which is a worrying sign as well. And we played this sort of open plan pub, which was right next to an army base, and there was audience, but they were all sat along the sort of back, which means there was about 20 meters between me and any of the crowd. And the crowd were all like squaddies, like lads, like big hard lads. And at the time, the main bulk of my 10-minute set was this rant about a fruit basket that went on for quite some time, and mainly just involved me just sort of naming fruit for probably too long. And I was the girl who went on before me. The main talking point of her set was how she, and I know it's probably a joke and not true, but was how she was raped by her dad. And the distant crowd loved it. They were really down with those jokes. And then I come on stage and I'm quite loud. Like, "Oi! Hey! Oi!" And you gotta be loud if they're gonna sit so damn far away. There was probably a width of an Olympic-sized swimming pool between me and them. That might be too far. I don't know a lot about sport. But I come out and I'm like, "How's it all going?" And there was a little sort of weird sort of, the stage was shaped like a living room. I remember there was like a leather sofa in there and a little chest of drawers and that little alcove right behind me. And I was like, "Oh, look, it's like I'm in my living room and you've just sort of come around and you're sort of staring through the window." And then I launched into this sort of edgy fruit material. And they were just staring at me. There was a large, really long bar between me and them, and then halfway through naming the fruit, I just went over and ordered myself a pint. Just started drinking that whilst going like, and like 3 kiwis and a bunch of grapes. 8 satsumas. Just naming fruit. I was like, this kills. This is killing in Brighton, mate. They're like, "Yeah, that is a fruit." You're right. I'm on board with this comedy. And after the gig, a couple of them came over. I was with another comedian called Wayne Lawrence. He's from Birmingham, a bit more of a lad. He went over much better than I did, which made the van drive home more difficult to bear, because he was like, "Oh yeah, and then I did this, and it was, and they all laughed at that. And do you remember when I improvised this bit?" And I was like, "Yeah, they fucking hated me though." And some of the squaddies came over to our table and they were like congratulating him on like a good set, which is always fun, isn't it, when you're with your travel buddy. And one of them just turned to me and went, "Mate, what's with all the fruit?" And I was like, "I don't know, man." We just received all this fruit and I thought it was hilarious. And he was like, "Okay, I've got a joke for you." And when someone says that, It's always a good joke. I can't even remember what the joke he said to me was, but it was a joke about nipples. I can't remember the premise, or if you write a joke about nipples, then I'll just say it's that joke. But this gig we did yesterday night was it was in Portsmouth, but it was like you go. I quite like Portsmouth, I've had some good gigs there. I was only being silly before. But all the gigs I've done have been kind of on a main road in Portsmouth. But we were driving along the main road, kind of near the Fat Fox, which is great. It's a nice comedy night, And that's on the main road. But when you turn off and you start going through like housing estates, the housing estate bit, and Portsmouth's one of the hardest towns to park in. I've decided there's so much street parking that it's hard to drive even just down the road sometimes when you get onto these streets. But the pub we were going to was right in the middle of this residential area, and it was called the British Queen, which is a hardcore name, I think. And then through the window we could just see all this Union Jack bunting, and I could see that there was like boxing on the TV, and it didn't look like the pub had a different room. And I was like, shit. I was with my mate Patrick Carmody, which is a funny name. When I first met Pat, I thought that that was sort of, because it looks like comedy when you see it on a lineup, and some people get confused and do write comedy. And I'm like, who's calling themselves Patrick Comedy? I am Patrick Comedy, Mr. Comedy. To you. It's like, oh, I know this guy's going to be good, isn't he? He's named after the thing he's doing. Which they've stopped doing. They used to do that all the time. Like Tanner. Joseph Tanner. That guy makes sunbeds. And, Bradley Cooper in the past would have, tried to thwart Mario. This is some tame comedy. This is the kind of stuff that wouldn't fly in gospel. The kind of material. But I was driving to the British Queen, which was British, so British, with Patrick Carmody, and we were going to meet our other friend, our fellow Brighton comedian Graham Caballard there as well. And we finally parked up somewhere and we walked in. And luckily there was a separate room. So this Solent Comedy are the name of the people who put the gig on, and they have this giant banner. And also, as well as the giant banner, there was another 2 giant Union Jack flags. It looked like a far right sort of rally, like a venue for that. Like one of my favourite films is This Is England, and this pub was England. I expected someone to come in and go, "We're not racists, we're realists," and everyone to be like, "Yeah, fuck, this isn't where I'm from." It's weird how the Union Jack is threatening, isn't it? Because it is just a flag, but I suppose I always associate flags with like the Navy, like boats, and I suppose it did used to be quite threatening. Maybe we're all descended from pirates or the Spanish, so whenever we see a Union Jack coming, we're like, fuck, they want us out. But it was 7:45 when we got in there, and the gig was supposed to start at 8, and there was only the comics in the room, and the promoter was saying that he didn't know if any of the pub people were going to come in. But like 2 minutes later, they all came in for it, which is great. But also, we might have all been about to die because these were like men. The men were men, and the women were men. But luckily, I even messaged, there's another gig we do called the Dolphins, so I messaged that guy and I was like, if no one comes to this one, can we go and jump on your one? Because, There's less Union Jacks at the Dolphin. But luckily we had a secret weapon on our side, which is the Bognor Regis comedian Glenn West, who proceeded to any sort of, before the gig started, I heard one table just working out what heckles they were going to use. And none of them were things that I wanted to be shouted at me. I wasn't going to go on first, and it's probably good. I think it's a good thing, really, because we were in the second bit, so we got to see we were going to get to see the lay of the land and see how the other comics sort of did, and Glenn proceeded to come out and just call everyone a cunt, literally everyone. It was every single. There was maybe 20 people there. Every single person who got called a cunt in some form or another by Glenn, which was amazing. I feel like it's the best way to approach it. I'm not sure how I would have approached it as an MC. I would be like, all right, it's weird that we're doing this. Thanks for coming in. And it would have been like, you're fucking shit, mate. But Glenn was like, no one's going to get involved in this. I didn't know that the gig was for charity as well, so he was calling everyone cunts, and then he would be like, and now, we're collecting money for charity at the end of the night. Like, it's a cancer charity. And then he'll just go really, really deep about cancer for a couple of minutes and then be like, back to the cunts. But they seemed up for it, man. They were like, I feel like Glenn's approach was like the best way to do it, because no one was going to shout out after that. Everyone was loving it because they all knew each other. So like, hey, he is a cunt. And he's like, and you're one. And everyone was like, yeah, he is one too. We're all on board with this. Before I went on stage, like at the start of the second bit, he had a game with a crowd called "Who's Your Favourite Pedo?" Which they would love it, and I was like, "Shit." I'm about to go on. My act hasn't progressed very much. Like, instead of just listing fruit, now I spend quite a considerable amount of time just listing women's names. And you can call that progression if you want, mate. But I mean, a list of words is a list of words, isn't it? You'll have to come and see it. I'm selling you my show right now. You've seen the list of fruit. What's he gonna do next? He's gonna hit you with a list of women's names that last seemingly forever. So he's playing this. Who's your favourite pedo game, and no one's really settling on who their favourite paedophile is. And I was like, right, I'm going to switch my set around. I've got a couple of dirtier jokes I'll just stick in at the start. And then he introduces me, and I can't help doing this, but I always just start shouting. I think I went, oh shit! I don't know why. Who do I think I am? But so I was like, all right. And then so you'll have to play into it. I'm gonna have to call these people cunts too. It's like, who here has Glenn not called a cunt? Which they love that. They love the fucking C word at the British Queen. And I was like, because if he hasn't called you a cunt, we can just get that out of the way now. And then I called a cunt like 5 times. And then I told them how scary their fucking pub was. I think what I'm going to do is, the gig was actually really good. It turned out to be really sound. Don't judge. Next time I see a pub which looks like it's out of This Is England, I'm just going to go in. They're going to be the nicest people. The gig was great. They were really sound, all of them. It was just scary, the pub. I think I said the only way that this pub could be more British is if it was baked inside a Cornish pasty. I'll put the clip on at the end. I've isolated this little bit of crowd work at the start. I'll stick it on. The only reason I want to stick it on is because last time I put a bit of stand-up at the end of the podcast, Steve, who produces it, put on a really funny bit of music, and I'm hoping that he does it again. Yeah, man, the gig was absolutely banging. Sometimes you'll go to a place where you've had a couple, it's been a mixed bag of gigs, but occasionally there'll be like a little gem in there and it'll be class, and that one was one of those. And it feels quite good at being a comedian because I don't always, address the sort of situation before I start. And so if you just sort of go straight into material, I found that people are just like, what are you on about? But you sort of establish yourself. If you're in a weird situation like that, you've got to kind of mention it, I feel. And I'm going to try and do it more often, try and open up a minute or two about, just about what's going on. If it's particularly weird, if it's just like in a normal comedy club, you might be like, hey, this is, what we all paid for. This is exactly what, you imagine before coming. And they're going to be like, yeah, it is. And I'll be like, okay. Now for the list of women's names. Penelope Mungbeans. 1 second. I've been getting really into comedy albums again. Because I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, too many podcasts probably. And the difference between a comedy album and a comedy podcast is that a comedy album is hilarious. And you'll know if you listen to this. Comedy podcasts are a bit dry sometimes. But I can't afford to buy CDs. I don't even know if they make CDs anymore, but I've got a Spotify account and they got a lot of comedy albums on there. And because I'm a bit like OCD and I love a list, as I've explained about 4 times already, you can like do album radio and you just give you some like other related comedians and I've been discovering a lot of people that I've heard quite a lot about on podcasts and stuff. Like I started with Mark Norman's. Let me just load it up here 1 second. Mark Norman's album, I think it's from 2017. It's the one with where he compares trains and planes to like a easy girl and like a high maintenance girl. So yeah, Don't Be Yourself by Mark Norman is a great album. I like Mark Norman, man. He's literally just doing whatever he wants. Like he's so open about. He's like not embarrassed at all to make himself look just as gross as possible. Like I think he was on like an American equivalent of like Loose Women. I don't know what it's called, but he was literally just saying like, oh, I'm glad that comedians don't work in offices because they'd all be like me too, like straight away. It's like, okay. I mean, you could stop, sexually assaulting women or whatever. I think the office is the, don't worry about the office bit, mate, if that's what you're all doing. But you know what it means. Don't Be Yourself, man. And then that put me on to Nate Bargatze, who I hear people talking about on podcasts all the time. That Nate Bargatze album is called it's called Full Time Magic, and it's quite good. That was quite good, but that put me on to one of the best comedy albums I've heard in ages, and that's Jim Gaffigan's Opinionated, which is real good, man. You should check that out. I think that's pretty new. That's like 2019 one. So if you like Jim Gaffigan, he just picks like a really innocuous thing, like a kind of food, and he'll just do like 20 minutes on it, just on that one thing. I think there's a bit in that album where he just talks about horses, just for a really, really long time. It's mine and stuff, and that's quite. I'm gonna try it a bit, like pick a thing and just try and write as many jokes about that one thing as you can. I feel like that'd be a fun thing to try out. So like one time I did during the Brighton Fringe, the venue that I play quite a lot, called the Artista. It's a secret comedy club in Brighton. They did a lot of they'd put on fringe shows, and all the slots that haven't been filled, he'd put on little compilations, and I found them really difficult. They were all at like 5 in the afternoon, and I don't know why, but I think I had a good one. I had a couple of alright ones, but most of them I didn't do very well on, and that's the first time I met that comedian. No, it's the second time I met this comedian called Rob Mulholland, who just released a special actually called Too Big to Fail. You can watch it for free on YouTube, so you should check it out if you like aggressive northern, angry comedy, which I do. All about free speech and that, mate. Well, it's not, but it mentions it. Everyone's doing their obligatory free speech joke. I think there's one in Chappelle's, and there's definitely one in Paper Tiger, which is Burr's. But anyway, I had this joke about anxiety, and one of the things he said to me was like, "That's all right. That's an all right bit, but you just like leave an idea too quickly. Like you should expand on stuff a bit more." And I feel like Jim Gaffigan's possibly the king of that. Do you know what I mean? Expanding on a very specific thing, just for ages and ages. So it'd be cool to like try and do that. I think I build bits in a different way. Sometimes you can piece bits together like some sort of jigsaw, and they all sort of become one bit. And it's like whenever you think about tags, you always, when you're trying to write comedy sort of tags, you always kind of tag stuff onto the end. Do you know what I mean? You increase it like that way. But I've found like you can get some pretty decent tags for the setup. Like you put your tag at the front sometimes. Which is fun, but yeah, Jim Gaffigan, man, and obviously, like, I listened to a couple of Hedbergs because I couldn't have an afternoon listening to comedy albums about a couple of Hedbergs, Strategic Grill Locations, and Do You Believe in Gosh was the one I listened to today, and I also listened to Mike Birbiglia's album called Slate Walk With Me Live, and whenever I used to find out what specials to watch on like Netflix and stuff, I would always you Google like best stand-up specials of all time, because before I started doing open mic comedy, I'd only seen like the kind of comedy specials they would show on like just mainstream TV, like Channel 4. So I watched that like Mince Pie one, or you see like a Ross Noble one, or like Jack D, or Peter Kay. Just at Blackpool Tower, just for a couple of weeks. Shouting Garlic Bread, that one. I watched that one. But I never really got into the older sort of like American specials. And at the top of each special is always like a Richard Pryor or Eddie Murphy's Delirious, where he wears a red leather sort of jumpsuit and says faggot a lot. It's of its time, man, and that time was a long time ago. But you've got to appreciate this sort of thing. It's like do you remember Witchfinders from like the 17th century? Big hats, the Crucible, that sort of thing. And you're like, man, they were talking about some crazy shit then, but it's of its time, so I'm down with it. Like, I found out recently that the sort of Witchfinder craze, the fad of, burning women alive for just sort of doing a herb garden. That crazy thing was kind of inspired all just by one book when it was released. I think like, I want to say 1600. It was like the second best-selling book of that year. It topped all of the lists. The second didn't top none of the lists, because the top one was always going to be the Bible. Authors didn't stand a chance after the Bible came out, mate. It's always up there. You'd think, like, it's funny how the Bible was always the best-selling book of all time, but surely at some point everyone must have one. Do you know what I mean? With people taking their Bibles to the grave, not letting anyone else look at their Bible. Surely, and there was much less people in the world. Surely at one point, the sale of Bibles stopped for a bit, and then some freak accident, and everyone's just lost their Bible. But yeah, this might on the Netflix list, Mike Birbiglia's comedy special, My Girlfriend's Boyfriend. I think that's what it's called. My girlfriend's boyfriend is on there, and it's good. It's like heartbreaking comedy. He's got a funny inflection on his voice, which makes him sound like he's always about to cry a bit. But he's also dresses like a classic, like Friends era New Yorker, like a big shirt, just big clothes. It looks like from the neck to his like ankles. He stood in front of one of those circus mirrors, the ones that make everything look large. He's got a normal sized head, but with a 90s haircut on it. But I'd only ever it's always in the top 10 of like what to watch on Netflix comedy special wise of all time. And I have seen in it, it's very good, and he sort of builds most American hours in my experience aren't like themed, but he always tells a long story that builds kind of like what you'd expect from like an Edinburgh Fringe hour. And it builds in a really great way, and he gets more like sort of worked up as he goes through. And this album, Sleepwalk with Me Live, I think it's from 2011. So it's not new, and you might have already heard it. I heard it for the first time today, and I'd recommend it, man. It's good. I can imagine it not being to everyone's tastes, really. It's a bit... It's self-deprecating, I'll put it that way. But there's a bit in it where he talks about being engaged, and I remembered that I'd forgotten that I was engaged once. I completely forgot that I got engaged. Which is crazy, but then it wasn't really, like, when I was in college, about 17, I thought I was cool. I really did. I started off by going to proper university, like proper college, and I did like normal learning. Like I did modern history, media studies, English, literature by accident, because I thought I got a B in English literature and a C in English language at GCSE, but it turns out I actually got a B in English language and a C in literature. But I took literature because I put it the wrong way around on my college application, and it proves that they don't check your GCSE results. So you could probably just put anything, I suppose, unless it was like straight A stars. They might want to see some evidence of that. But I think I lasted about 6 until about February. I don't know how long that is. September to February. And I dropped out because I wanted to take my band to the next level. The same band that recorded a demo in my mate's kitchen. A demo which we sent to Jack Endino. And Jack Endino, who is the producer of Nirvana's Bleach. Because we were going to be the next Nirvana's Bleach. And he did get back to us. And I was the singer. And he said, it sounds like your lead vocalist is the Cookie Monster. But, at least he got back to us. One step on the wrong of becoming the next Nirvana's Bleach. But I thought it was pretty cool. And there was a kind of a damage to girl. She was like a goth. But a goth not by choice. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you'll see a goth and you'll be like, they've chosen to be a goth, mate. Sometimes you meet someone who's goth by goth from birth. That girl's always going to be a goth. So I borrowed, my oldest brother had a copy of the Satanic Bible by Anton LaVey. And it's quite a surprising book, really, because you expect it to be all about Satan, but it's kind of not. It's kind of much more, it feels like a much more sort of hippier than that, and it's like a much more like pagan, like a bit like, it's like about nature and stuff, the earth, and it's like, it's not at all what I thought it was going to be. This book, it's more about creating your own sort of moral codes and that, but then they'd go and ruin it by having a supplement which is called the Necronomicon, which is a book of spells. You didn't need that. You'd reeled me in. You had me there. Do you know what I mean? You had me, but you've lost me a bit. It's like if you talk to L. Ron Hubbard and he's teaching you all about that, the way that, how Tom Cruise talks to people, and he's like so concentrated on them, and everyone always says he's like the best listener, and I guess they teach you that in Scientology. And then he starts talking about the aliens, and you're like, you had me for a bit, mate, but come on now. A book of spells. But I borrowed his Satanic Bible, and I was like in the pub or something, and I was just like, oh, what's this in my bag? Oh, it's the Satanic Bible. And she was a real goth. So she was like, oh, cool. And I was like, yeah, I've joined the Satanists. I'm a Satanist. In fact, I was thinking of doing some Satanist shit if you want to do some Satanist shit with me. Using Satan as a chat-up line, mate. No one's doing it. Gonna do some Satanist shit. I'm gonna draw a pentagram with chalk on the ground. I'm gonna put candles at each of the points. And we're going to work out if that does anything. We're going to read this book. Do you want to do it with me? You want to come? Then do that. And she was like, yeah. You seem like a legitimate Satanist. You're wearing a Slipknot hoodie. Luckily, she never brought that up. We just went somewhere else. Like to her house or something. Or to my house. But she was never like, I ended up going over for about, we were like in a relationship for about 4 or 5 years, and she never once went, so about that satanic ritual we're gonna do. I feel like if she was goth by choice, she would have probably mentioned, but she was goth from birth, so had other shit on her mind. Do you remember when magic mushrooms used to be legal? And then in Middlesbrough, near where we were from, there was a place called the Festival Shop, and you could buy magic mushrooms from there in a big bag. And we thought it'd be fun to do that. She hasn't. This is the first time we were going to go. The plan was pick up the mushrooms, go to my house, and hang out with my parents for a bit, and then go to the woods. I had some woods in my house, and we would take the mushrooms and have a little jaunt around the woods. But when we got to my house, the shrooms were in my rucksack. My parents asked us if we wanted. They met her and stuff, and she's kind of awkward in social situations, so a bit shy, like a bit. So they were like, "Do you want to come and have dinner with us? Break some bread with my family?" And I was like, "Sure, yeah, I'll have dinner." But she was like, "Oh no," like she didn't want to sit and eat with my family. So they were like, "Okay, it is a bit odd, but go up. You can." She went up and sort of sat in my bedroom with a rucksack, and I ate dinner while she was upstairs. And then when I came upstairs, maybe like don't know how long it takes to eat dinner, half an hour or something. Maybe a bit longer. Depends if my dad was stuffing a marrow or not. When I got back upstairs, she had eaten 3/4 of the mushroom. I don't know how many we even had, but it was a fair amount. But you could tell it was a fair amount by the look on her face. And I was like, why? What's going on? And she was like, saying that she was hungry, but she was just a bit socially awkward to eat with my family. But she was still hungry, so instead she ate the mushrooms. And I was like, oh, wow, there's only 1/4 of them left. I want some mushrooms too, and you're in danger of eating all the mushrooms, so I'm going to eat that 1/4 of a bag of mushrooms. So I ate that 1/4 of a bag of mushrooms, and at this point, we're in my house still, and it's only just after dinner time, so I'm going to say it's 7 o'clock. Very quickly, she started to not have the best of time on mushrooms. She got really freaked out by my head. Now, I've not got very good hair. And at the time, it was long, and I always wore it up, and it was unkept. And that freaked her out a bit. She thought that my head was made of mud and worms, and they were all moving about, and mushrooms will do that to you, man. Things will move. That's what I'm trying to say. And it's difficult for your own state of mind when you have to keep explaining to someone that your head isn't made of mud and worms. Because I didn't want to think about my head being made of mud and worms, because after a while I was a bit like, is my head made of mud and worms? But it kept going on for ages, and in this, like, I couldn't sit near her because my head was made of mud and worms. But also my room wasn't very big, so I had to sit sort of on the other side of the room with someone who just kept pointing really scared at my head. And I was like, even if it is mud and worms, if I just had a bag of mud and worms, you wouldn't be behaving like this. Do you know what I mean? Just, it's only mud and worms, which I don't think was helping. And we ended up, it just got really intense in my bedroom. And we ended up having this sort of an argument about mud and worms, and it was awful. It was angular. It was like it's like it felt like you could see the argument. It was all jagged and like icy. It was bizarre, and we were loud. And my parents have never mentioned it ever, which is great for them because we haven't. It's 7:30. It's 8 o'clock at night. Probably maybe a little bit late by this point, maybe 9 or 10. And we're in my room and we're shouting about mud and worms, mate. And I'm trying to shout. I'm shouting, I'm not made of mud and worms. I'm not made of mud and worms. They must have been like, what is happening? And then they must have been like, we know that what's happening. Do you know what I mean? They're making a Frank Zappa album. Yeah, I ended up going on for so long. I was like, this is the worst night ever. I can't keep having this argument. I'm just going to go to sleep. So I laid in bed with all my mud and worm hair. And I tried to go to sleep. And as I was going to sleep, like about maybe 20 minutes passed. And she just went, will you marry me? And I'm still off my tits on mud and worms at this point. And it freaked me out. What a thing to say. I'm now looking back, I think like she thought I was asleep. It's still a weird thing to say, but I think that she thought that I was asleep. I had another girlfriend who sometimes would take photos of me asleep, but she had arranged the duvet in a really weird way. Like drape the duvet. It's odd. Take photos. And I was like, that's weird to do, but at least I know who you are and I am asleep, so I don't have to actually deal with how weird that is. Well, like, I've never had anyone. Oh yeah, I think I've been drawn once whilst I'm asleep, which is odd, man, to have someone, someone's been intently looking at you whilst you're asleep. It's bizarre, I think. There's a comedian I know up in Chichester called Lucy, and she has one of those sleep apps where, because she sleep talks, so she has one of those sleep apps where you record yourself as you sleep. It records you while you're asleep, and then she said something in her sleep talking, and a man's voice answered her back, and she posted it on YouTube, and she doesn't live with anyone, and there was no one in her house, and there was no sign of a break-in. I'm starting to scare myself just by saying this. I'm sat in the middle of my room with nothing behind me, and I keep looking over my own shoulder. But she posted it on Facebook, and I sent her. I was like, "Do you mind if I try and find out what's going on? Because I love a bit of paranormal shit." So I emailed at the University of Sussex. I emailed the video to a sleep researcher, and I said, "All right." I've never spoken to a scientist via email. I've never cold called a scientist before. And I was like, all right, check out this video. My mate sleep talking, but there's a voice on there and she doesn't know who that is, but the person never got back to me, and the case went cold. But yeah, she said, "Will you marry me?" And it freaked me out, and it started another argument, and I was a bit like, because we're just on mushrooms, mate, and I was like, why would you ask me that? I was like, I don't know what's going on as it is. My hair's made of modern worms, you know what I mean? You haven't come near me all night. You're like crying and pointing at my head all the time, and it's freaking me out, and now you want to marry me, like you want to get married, and it's all too much. And then I feel like she didn't even mean to say it. It just came out because she'd eaten 3/4 of a bag of mushrooms. So she was like, "Fuck, what? I wish I'd never said that." And I was like, "What? So you don't want to marry?" She was like, "Well, I would marry you. Yeah, I just didn't know if I really meant to say that." And I was like, "Well, you did say it. There must be a reason why you said it. And I feel like I would marry you too." And then she was like, "Well, if we both feel like we should get married, maybe we should just get married then." And I was like, "All right." And then we got engaged. And we stayed engaged. Got a ring. I got one of those ceramic mood rings from the Goth shop, man. And the size was wrong, so I wore it on my thumb. And the mood was always brown. I don't know. And I don't know what mood that is. It's funny because it was silly. We told people. The next day we told my parents, who'd heard the whole argument. They must have done. They never mentioned it. I would have come straight in that room and have been like, "What the fuck is going on in here?" I've got other family members too. They must have heard it. But we told people, and they're like, "All right." But then it added an extra layer because she was Goth from birth. She was quite a volatile person, and like we used to argue quite a lot. And being engaged sort of added an extra layer of armor onto our relationship, but we'd still argue from inside the armor, you know. And so instead of breaking up, maybe when we should have broke up, the next big argument, we just decided not to be engaged anymore, but stay. We're like, maybe we're not ready for this marriage. And we weren't, mate. So instead of breaking up, we just took it down a notch. We'll go back to the relationship, which then ended. But maybe if we didn't get engaged on mushrooms, or engaged at all, we would have just been like, well, we were at the bottom of the relationship, sort of on square one of the relationship board game. So, you know, go to jail. The relationship jail, that's what I'm saying. It's like I'm making some sort of Monopoly analogy. But, yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I completely forgot. That Mike Birbiglia album reminded me that I got engaged one time. This is the Alkaline Podcast, man. My name is Riggs. It's the podcast where I try and get clean or die trying, and the last few of this bit of the podcast have been not good sobriety-wise, and it's sad to report that it's kind of not being good again. For like last week. But so I'm going to do something else. I'm going to have my next week, the next episode of this podcast, I'll be getting my first guest on, who's local comedian Dan Fardell, who has also had his problems with drinking, and it was World Mental Health Day last week, and because my sort of social media is only comedians, a lot of sad people on Facebook on that day, man. A lot of people with a lot of mental health issues. I didn't post anything. I just do it on here to whoever's listening. But Dan put up kind of a poignant one on about drinking, and there was a couple of points in it that I really relate to. And I feel like he's doing quite well, and we have spoken a little bit about it before, like comedy gigs and stuff, when we've been on the same lineup. But, he works in care, he's like a real adult person. So I'm going to bring him onto the podcast, and we're going to talk about, because I think he's about 6 months in, and he's doing really well. And at one point I was 3 months in, and then it all sort of went downhill during the month of September, and it still hasn't quite recovered. So I'm going to ask him, I'm going to talk about it, I'm going to talk about what, because there's all different kinds of people with drinking problems. Like I won't drink loads of spirits, and I'm not like drinking a bottle of vodka in the morning, like Nikki Six or something. I'm just I only drink lager, I drink I'm all right, but if I break and have that one, then I'll have about 7, on a Tuesday. And it's silly as well, because you're trying not to drink. You'll go to some event where all your friends are there drinking. If you're gonna stop doing it, stop doing it then, when it's like a good reason to drink, because everyone there is doing it. But then you will end up not drinking then, because you are trying not to drink, and then 2 days later you'll be just at an open mic comedy gig, which we've not met much audience there, and then all of a sudden you drink 4 pints. Got to try harder, I think. And I feel like talking to somebody who is doing really well, and possibly has even had a worse experience with like drinking than I did. It'd be cool to hear it'd be cool to hear it from someone else's perspective, what the cravings are like, what just their take on it. See if there's anything else I can learn from that. But I don't want it to be it's not sad, I'm aware of it. This is why I'm doing this. So I'm just trying to work through it. I'm trying also not to be so hard on myself about it, and that can be dangerous as well, because you're like, oh well. It's good to feel, I think. One thing that drinking does is it stops you feeling, and I think that's why people do it. You feel quite strongly about stuff that you previously didn't feel anything about, but you don't feel the things that you normally feel a lot about. But it is good to feel, and I want to feel. All right, so I'm going to record that on Friday afternoon, and it'll be released next Monday. I'm going to put the clip of the opening bit. I was tied between whether or not I should put the bit on where I shout "cunt" at everyone, but because I did talk about that, I feel like I'll I feel like that's what I'll do. I'll put the cunt one on. So, little trigger warning. I'm going to say cunt about 6 times in the stand-up clip, but then it goes on to a bit, and I want you to listen to the last bit anyway, because I improvised a joke, which I think I might put into my act. So, just the last joke is about the HMS Victory. So, have a little listen anyway. Thanks for listening to me. This is the Alkaline Podcast. I said the last episode was episode 16, but this is episode 16. Tune in next week where I'll be talking to comedian Dan Fardell. Anyway, thanks for listening. Bye.
Is there anyone who hasn't called a cunt yet? Because we can clear that up right now. Raise your hands. No, you pretty much blanketed the whole room. Cut! Let's have a great night of comedy. In a bit we'll just talk about cancer a little bit more. Just to make everyone feel at ease. This is the scariest pub I've ever seen. Jesus Christ! Come to the British Queen, we've got Union Jacks everywhere! Fucking hell, you were watching boxing when I came in, man. Fucking hell, I made contacts, I live in Brighton, all we got is micro breweries, mate. If you want a pint in Brighton now, you just gotta go down to someone's shed. Do you know what I mean? And drink some armpit sweat that he's been brewing all afternoon. Jeez, the only way this place could be more British, right, is if it was baked inside a Cornish pasty. Do you know what I mean? Hey, it's nice to be in Portsmouth though. It's good to be in a real pub. Do you know what I mean? It's nice. That's how I was in Portsmouth. Like, I came to have a go on the HMS Victory. Anyone ever done that? Yeah, man. I found out that they named that boat before it had won anything. That's a lot of pressure. That's a lot of pressure on the people on that boat. They're going into that first battle like, if we lose this, we're going to look like a bunch of dickheads, mate. Do you know what I mean? I'd rather be on the HMS. I just hope everyone gets along. Sweet, man. I normally I start my gigs by asking if there's any Susans